for a longer period of time, they know who the people are, they know who their readers or viewers are, and they usually do a really nice job.
Well, and I think because the whole concept of a career is going by the wayside somehow, and I think that it's tougher to establish relationships, and that's like with your office, I felt like we had a relationship, and I valued that relationship, and I always felt like you should have enough of a relationship where you can vouch for the person when they're not there. It's one of my guys said they saw somebody who I trust a lot someplace they shouldn't be. And I said, "You're wrong." "Well, how do you know? You didn't see." I said, "You're wrong. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't have done that. He wouldn't be there. He'd have no reason to. You're mistaken." And I just felt like that office and Delaware County also took some time to understand what we did and how we could help them. And I always felt like when they were calling, they were always giving us. Well, I can't say you always gave us winnable situations,
yeah,
because they're not always winnable.
No.
Winning is a weird term in a lot of things, but you always gave us honest situations that you thought we could possibly help, or at least not hurt.
And you hit the nail on the head when you said honest, because if the answer is I can't tell you the answer, I'm going to tell you I can't tell you the answer. I'm not going to dance around it. I'm not going to try and come up with some other way of saying it. And frankly, the same. I think that is a lesson that I have learned as a defense attorney that has served me well when I was a prosecutor. Because as a defense attorney, you've got to be honest with your clients. If they're in deep trouble, you need to tell them they're in deep trouble so they can understand just how serious this situation is. And I, over the course of my life, have had very serious conversations with people about exactly how bad the situation is so that they are informed and can make whatever they view to be the right decision for themselves. And I think when you're sitting down and having a conversation with an 18-year-old kid about the fact that he might be going to jail for the rest of his natural-born life, it makes it a lot easier when I'm having a phone call with you and I'm saying, "Mark, I can't tell you that answer right now." Because I've had some really hard conversations with people.
What are like a couple differences, three differences between defense and prosecutors that you would say?
Well,
both.
Yeah, sure. The number one difference is who you're representing. This may seem obvious, but as a prosecutor, you're representing the Commonwealth. Your focus should be on doing the right thing, getting justice, whatever that means. As a defense attorney, you're representing that individual. And sure, there are a lot of things that might be helpful to keep in mind there, but my job is to represent the person. So when John Doe or Jane Smith comes in and hires me to be their lawyer, I'm looking out for their best interests and nobody else. Nobody else's best interest. They need a friend and a colleague and a trusted advisor and someone who's going to give them good advice, and I'm their person. Sometimes you hear lawyers called counselor. It's true. You're counseling them on every aspect of life. And so the prosecutor isn't necessarily doing that for the victim. Obviously, the victim's input is going to be very important.
He's doing it for the Commonwealth or the
exactly.
government.
So it's not victim versus defendant. It's Commonwealth versus defendant, and that means making decisions that maybe the victim doesn't like or maybe the victim doesn't agree with. You're informing them, but as the defense attorney, I'm representing the defendant.
So the prosecutor, I have to break things down in simple terms because I'm slow, as they used to say. At least that's what they told me it was. The prosecutor's client is the law.
Is society.
Is the person.
Right. The prosecutor's client is society, really. All of us.
Okay, so the prosecutor's client is people.
Yeah.
And the defense attorney's client is a person.
Is the individual. Because it's the individual's rights or liberty or life that the Commonwealth is trying to infringe upon. So I'm making sure I'm standing up for that person. I'm making sure I'm explaining everything to that person. I'm making sure the rules are followed so that that person hasn't been taken advantage of. So who your client is one of the biggest things. The other thing that jumps to mind immediately is the burden of proof. So the Commonwealth, when someone's charged with a crime, has the highest burden of proof in the law. Meaning, in a criminal case, we when I was a prosecutor, you had to convince 12 people unanimously that somebody committed this crime beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a higher burden than like if it's a car crash.
Then the defense attorney just has to say, it might not have happened.
There's no burden. The defense attorney has no burden. So Commonwealth has the burden, and it's the highest level of law. So like if you're in a motor vehicle crash that's not a crime, and person A sues person B for that car crash, that's a lower burden in that case. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's actually a lower burden. Okay. So it's more like, a little bit more than 50%, sort of. But in a criminal case, they don't put a number on it, but it's darn near 100%. So the defendant doesn't have a burden. And when you think it through, it makes sense. Because we live in a society where you don't have to explain why you're innocent. The government has to explain why you're guilty.
Okay.
So the defendant shouldn't have to explain themselves. They can, if you're charged with a crime, you can sit there quietly, not say anything, not do anything, and that would be something that is perfectly appropriate under our laws. So that's something else that jumps to mind immediately as far as the difference between a prosecutor and a defense attorney.
What's the difference between law and justice? People often associate them together.
Law is the rules.
Okay.
Justice is the outcome.
There you go. That's the simplest answer I've heard.
And I just thought of that now, actually.
Well, that was good. That was really good.
The law are the rules, is the rules.
That is the simplest answer that I've gotten from anybody from a district attorney's office. That's really good. Yeah. Well, it's recorded, so because we're both going to forget it. The
other thing, when you said it's a simple answer, somebody once said that engineers are in the business of making the complicated simple, and lawyers are in the business of making the simple complicated.
You ever watch Better Call Saul?
I'm familiar with it, but I don't watch it. But I am familiar with it.
You should. It's really good. Yeah. And I would imagine if you're a lawyer, you would enjoy it in a different way. But it really is good. I had Chief Federal Justice on here, Ted McKeon. We talked about Better Call Saul, and Rolling Stone did a review, and they said it was if Shakespeare were writing television.
Wow.
Because it really is King Lear.
That's high praise, yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those shows that you watch and you see what everybody's doing, but you don't know what it's going to... You can't figure it out because nobody is dumb. Mm-hmm. And I really like... Shows have gotten so dumbed down.
Yeah. Well, and that's... The idea that nobody's dumb is good, too, because both prosecutors and defense attorneys, are, for the most part, in my experience, are very smart, are very dedicated. They want to do a good job. Most of the people you interact with in life, frankly, I would hope, want to be professional. They want to do their job well. And I think that's a good thing. Because if everybody's doing their job well, the system works. Any prosecutor would tell you that it's much better to have a good defense attorney on the other side than having somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Because then you're worried about doing their job too.
Right.
It's always better. I'd rather have an experienced, good prosecutor on the other side because I know they're going to follow the rules and do the job.
Right, and it doesn't look like you're just beating somebody up at court too. You want a decent battle. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
You tell me. Yeah, I mean, this is the one time you get to ask a lawyer questions and not get a bill, Mark.
Well, so. I was thinking that you're missing the opportunity to combine your things, and maybe we should talk, and you should do like a little legal podcast.
A legal podcast?
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah, I'd be interested in that. Yeah.
That combines a couple of your passions and everything, and it's easy enough now.
Yeah,
and give you some help with that.
Absolutely.
But it's a lot of people get. This is the way that younger people read. It's through podcasts, and they get their information, and they become followers. And
how'd you get into this? How'd you end up doing podcast?
I was driving by the station. I was driving somewhere, and somebody called me and said, "There's somebody on the radio, and they're saying stuff about search and rescue, and it's wrong." And I went to the station, and I was coming back from. I believe I was coming back from your office, actually. Oh. And it was either you or Jack Whelan's office. And I was, I had uniform on, and I came in, and they flagged me back like I was supposed to be there. And kept flagging me back at the old station. I went and sat down, and they asked me a couple questions, and they said, and I answered them, and I corrected what I could politely, and then they said, would you like to come back? And I said, I don't know if I have anything to say. And I came back and I talked, and they said, would you like to come back again? I said, I don't think I have anything else to say. And then and then I came back, and then I had this idea for the show because I had wanted to do something I saw so many people that were passing away that their voices weren't being heard and being lost in the mist, and I wanted to capture those. And I started doing it. I said do it for 6 months, and then what happened was I originally ran into a problem. Like, I wanted people mainly who didn't, in a profession, who don't like to talk. And I wanted people who were, let's see, I started a show called Unsung Everyday People. I started in August. So everybody's on vacation. People don't want to talk. I did everything wrong. It worked out. But what I found was that I had people that would come to me that wouldn't talk, and then they'd call me up a year later and go, I'd like to come on. I go, well, why now? It's time now. And they had something they wanted to say. They were comfortable in their skin. And then one of my oldest friends says that the show is an invented excuse by you to get together with people that you only saw in crisis or contentious situations and have a decent conversation.
That's a good way of describing it.
You know?
Yeah.
And I just thought that there was so much that was out there that was just garbage and just this visceral, fighting, and I just wanted to do something different.
Well, and you can do it in more than 140 characters, and you can do it over a period of time where you don't have to worry about commercial breaks, and you can have an actual conversation with somebody about whatever the topic is that they're there for. And you're right, it's become very popular, and it's interesting.
And I find many people, yourself included, they are, in a way, much more interesting when they're out of office. There's a tension lift. Like when you see the president being interviewed out of office, there's a tension lift on it.
Absolutely. Because when you're in office, that's absolutely true. When you're in office, you are aware that you are representing the office. And it's not that you're not being honest. It's not that you're not answering the questions. But you're always a little bit more probably guarded.
You're always
exactly.
on.
Yeah, people used to say, some of my friends would say, it's like, oh, you're going Mike Noone on somebody, where you have to you're in the moment. You've got the tie on. I don't have a tie on today.
I know he's not wearing a tie. He's freaking me out.
Yeah, but it's sitting. You have to be in the moment to represent the office in that professional way. I mean, the fact that I was always in a suit and a tie. And
I was actually talking to somebody pulling in from Chester County, and I said, I got to go. I'm interviewing Noone today. I said, he's standing there. I think that's Noone. He's not wearing a tie.
Yeah. I once there was an incident happened in the middle of the night, and maybe not in the middle of the night. Maybe it was like 11 o'clock at night or something like that. And I ended up going to the police station for this incident that we were investigating. And the lieutenant at the time, who I'm still friends with, I was very good friends with, sees me walking in a suit and a tie. Now, I had been at another event, and I had just gotten home when my phone rang. But I show up at 11 o'clock at night, 10, 15 minutes after he calls me in a suit and a tie. He's looking at me like, yo, Mike, what are you, sleep in one of those things? So it just fostered this image that, you basically are just sitting around waiting for the phone to ring in a suit and a tie.
Yeah, you get a reputation. I tell a story. My grandmother, I would always travel places. I'd bring her bells, and she'd put them on the mantelpiece and give her bells. And I said, and I brought her a bell once, and she said, no more bells. Mm-hmm. I said, but Grandma, you love bells. No. When me and your grandfather got married, we were given a set of bells. And it was the only thing we had. We put it on the mantelpiece. And then more bells kept coming. And always bells. And I got enough bells. I don't want any more bells. I can't stand them.
So that's hilarious.
There's a story... there's a story behind everything, and why people are the way they are.
And it's the common shared experience. Because as you're telling me that story, I'm thinking about my father, who I would sometimes I'd go to this one grocery store and get this, like, I don't know, it was like a kind of roast beef that I thought he said he liked one time, right? And so I'm getting it like every week, dropping it off. Eventually, after about 6 months of this, he's like, I think I'm good on the London broil, Mike. Maybe you don't need to do that for a little while. And then I realized I got that from his mother, my grandmother, because when I was a little kid, if it was Christmas time and I went to my grandparents' house and I said,